So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming here to Itapa. And now I would like to introduce the participants of the discussion channel dedicated to cybersecurity. First of all, our chairman, Marek Czarnecki, second, the national expert at the General Secretariat of the Council of the EU. So, Marek. Then we have here Jean Bayon de la Tour, Cyber Development Leader for Marsh Continental Europe. Next to him is sitting Botond Feledy, Director of Institute of Social Reflection from Hungary. We have also representative of Slovakia, Mr. Rastislav Janota, Director of National Unit of SK-CERT. And I would also like to welcome our female participant from Poland, Ms. Barbara Sztokfisz from Kościuszko Institute and Project Manager of the European Cybersecurity Forum, CyberSec. And we have also distinguished guests, Mr. Zsolt Géczi from Regional Account Manager of Slovakia Fortinet. And last, but definitely not least, Mr. Martin Sůra, CEO of ATOS IT Solutions and Services. Just one final comment to the speakers. If you are speaking, please lean to the microphone so everybody can hear, especially in the back. Thank you.
Thank you for the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I will skip the traditional introduction outlining the importance of the topic of cybersecurity because I think that much has been said in the morning keynotes. And instead, in order to get you into the proper cybersecurity mood, in case you're not there yet, I would like to share with you a few facts and figures. And these facts and figures are from open source intelligence dashboard published weekly by the European Cybersecurity Center. So it means that it's not a yearly report, it's not a monthly report, it's something that comes out every week. This paper here, it's full of figures regarding cybersecurity incidents and threats. And I will just more or less randomly pick up three. So, first one, for example, hackers obtain nuclear power plant plans in France. Hackers have accessed confidential documents about nuclear power plants and prisons in a cyber attack on a French firm. So this information is from Deutsche Welle. Then another one, 81.5 million voter records for sale on dark web ahead of US midterm elections, which were, I guess, last week, right? The database reportedly includes voters' IDs, full names, current and previous physical addresses, gender, phone number, and citizenship status. This information is from Forbes. Last one, just to finish the examples. British Airways reveals even more victims of massive cyber attack. British Airways owner IAG has said that 185,000 further customers may have had their personal details compromised during a cyber attack. So this is just something that happened in a week, more precisely week 44, which was I think 2 weeks ago. So I think that outlines that really cybersecurity is something that has to be dealt with at a strategic level. It is something that has to be dealt with by CIOs of private companies, as well as top executives of public institutions. And in order to outline the threat landscape on the global level, we would like to, with our distinguished speakers, discuss today this topic. So let me first pose the first question to our distinguished discussants. My first question is, how has the nature of cybersecurity threats and risks changed for governments and private sector from the global perspective? How the governments and the private sector reacted to this change? And is this response sufficient? What do you think? Who wants to start? And please try to be brief and to the point, so that everyone has a chance to.
Thank you. So yes, I'll start on the changing landscape, and I think it has been stated this morning. The use of IT is not something new. It has been used by companies since thousands of years, decades. But what is new is the interconnectivity, and is the heavily use of IT and the highly dependency of companies, and that's creating more data and more attack surface for hackers. From an insurance broker perspective, so our job is to understand and to measure, to quantify the financial impact of such cyber attack. So to do so, we have some actuarial models, and following all the claims we are seeing on a day-to-day basis in Europe and also globally, we are updating these models, and that's how we see the evolution of the risk, because the impact is getting. Oh yes, thank you. Oops. Like this, yes. So we are seeing an increasing in terms of frequency and an increasing in terms of severity of the claims, and so I think we have 70% more claims in our cyber insurance policies versus prior year. And so we have to update our models in order to give a more accurate view for our clients and on what can be the financial loss if tomorrow there is a cyber attack. So that's the changing landscape, huge increase in frequency and huge increase in severity. In terms of type of claims also, something I wanted to share, there is a big difference in terms of type of claims here in Europe and in the US. In the US, still the vast majority of IT issues are data breaches, but here in Europe it's more about business interruption and unavailability of IT systems.
Thank you. Who wants to continue? Botond, please.
Thank you. Well, I'm more researching the nation-state side and interstate conflict of cyber breaches and incidents. And as you have probably remarked in the last years, it is quite clear that certain states to the European Union have actually invested heavily to create their, let's put it in that way, their internet sovereignty or digital autonomy. I'm talking about China, I'm talking about other countries that can, in one form or another, insulate some form of the traffic and information that is coming over the web. The bad news is that the European Union is not such a successful actor in that. So the digital autonomy is currently a non-existent phenomenon inside the European Union. We are, and all the presentations we heard this morning are talking about nation-state reactions. And there is the European Defense Agency, the European Network and Information Security Agency, but these are minuscule agencies with practically coordination competencies. So just one remark. If you compare the amount of debate we have about Frontex and to protect the physical borders of the European Union, since 2015, how many times and hours have been invested in that? And how many political crises have been created? Just ask the question to yourself, how many hours have been devoted to this kind of debate from the European summits to sub-regional summits, comparing the internet sovereignty or digital autonomy of the European Union, and then also take a look at the numbers in investment.
Rasto?
Yes, that was very true. The last comment is something which we are worried about quite some time. I will try to react to the other part of the question from Marek. Cybersecurity at the end, cyber defense is a reactive type of activity, which means that companies, organizations are reacting to attacks. And you would agree probably that it's usually too late. Companies, organizations should be prepared. Unfortunately, many of them are definitely not prepared. Why? There are many international researches who shows us that primary motivation with most companies is compliance, unfortunately, which means that if it is not an order from the law, duty from the law, companies, organizations, regardless if those are private or public, do nothing or very, very less. And on the other side, even if company did full compliance duties, it's usually not enough. Law is document or the level which cover quite visible amount of companies, visible amount of persons who should follow particular law. So every single subject has different needs, different level of problems, and at the end it should implement different measures. So there is no way how to create the optimal compliance request specification which will suit to all companies, all subjects. Every company should do always a little bit more than just to follow what is in the law. So my view is right now that based on the NIS directive, a lot of European states, as a part of the transposition, creates quite good cybersecurity environment from the legislation point of view. Not all, not because there are different NIS directives, but there is always different approaches for the transposition and different, let's say, priority or importance was given to such activity. So there are some states which did minimum, and the result is almost nothing. But many states are good. So the compliance side right now is on the quite good phase. What next? That's a lot of questions. Thank you.
I would follow up to Rastio what just said, and I'm about to confirm that the legislation, as we see it in Slovakia and Czech Republic, is a really good level. I would a little bit just tease you on the topic of the compliance. We understand, and I'll give you the example of the GDPR. We used to have the law governing the protection of the individual data, I don't know, 10 years already. Did anybody hear about that before the GDPR came in? So sometimes compliance can trigger the discussion, and the discussion is triggering the education on the topic. So I think this is very similar, that sometimes just trying to do the compliance, that the companies understand that in the change environment where the data are a crucial asset which not have been in the past. It's really in a core of their business value, are starting to understand that they have to do something more, that the attacks are not just to disconnect their operation, it's about the stealing their value out of those companies. And in my understanding, more and more companies do understand that and proactively starting to take measures on that.
Yes, I totally agree with my previous speakers. And actually, going back to the first part of the question asked by Marek, I would like to raise the question of how the threats evolve. Actually, as we see the digital ecosystem and digital solutions are evolving on a daily basis, and so do threats. And actually, as good guys have to be prepared all the times, the bad guys have to be prepared only once. So, like, this is the most important thing in this cybersecurity landscape, that when we think about the complexity, it's not only that the threats are different. They change in the kind, they change in intensity, and also they change in the repercussions they might have to the environment. And also, I think that the critical factor in this is our growing dependence on the technology, the growing dependence of our networks, of our systems, of the critical systems especially. And with this growing dependence and the growing sophistications of the cyber threats, I think we need to look cross-sectoral on this, and this is also the NIS directive, which is about that some sectors deal better with the cybersecurity. For example, this is the financial sector. Some sectors are doing are not coping effectively with this. For example, this is the health sector, which is the case also, I think, in the Central and Eastern Europe. So this complexity is actually has to be tackled from the perspective of the government and also the private sector.
Thank you for your view. Zsolt, please.
Yeah, just a short comment. We have a great time with the digital transformation. Yeah, it's amazing. What we say that in the same time we have to take care of the security transformation to take care of all those systems and informations, because the threats landscape is huge. And what we see, and I'm personally what I like, is that the regulations, the laws, many companies and they are realizing that it's good to do, and those security implementations are coming. So I think it's good.
Okay. I think we have to dynamize the discussion a little bit. So now I will pose another question, and each of you has only 30 seconds to answer. So which of the security risks and threats do you think will be the most important one in the next 5 years? Who wants to start? I would suggest the lady.
I can
Ladies
start.
first.
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, as we saw, especially last year, the rise of the ransomware, and when it began, like, quite in recent years, in I think the huge attack, the first well-known was the CryptoLocker in 2013. And then last year we observed two major attacks, the WannaCry and NotPetya, that attacked also the national cybersecurity systems and the critical systems of many countries, like the health sector, transportation, logistics. And I think with this is quite successful model for some criminal groups, because with the rise of the cryptocurrencies and with the common use of cryptocurrencies, they can stay anonymous, and it is very difficult to attribute such an attack. And also this the ransomware attack is not only the downtime that is very, very dangerous. There are also potential data loss, potential data theft, the intellectual property theft, etc. So I think the combination of ransomware and cryptocurrencies that are not regulated right now. So this is the critical threat, I think.
All right, thank you. That was a little more than 30 seconds.
I'll not talk about this one, so I'll try to find another threat. I think companies are dealing with their IT system, and they are taking care of it first on IT security level and more on a broad company-wide risk issue. But the IT they rely on is, first of all, their IT system, but also the supply chain and their supplier and their client, and they rely on the availability of this IT system. And so I think one of the biggest IT risks of companies for the future will be to be sure that they manage the whole supply chain and the whole availability of their IT system. Was it okay, time-wise?
Yeah, almost.
Let me pin one more point further. You have talked about companies taking the risk. The IDC representative mentioned that budgets stay flat. Imagine if they had money. Imagine if they had the decision and the will to increase the budget. And what? Could they hire people? Actually, we have also discussed that understaffing and lack of capabilities and lack of knowledge and talents on the market is actually the basic underpinning threat to the European cybersecurity.
Shortly for me, ransomware as a service, DDoS as a service, cybercrime as a service. So everything is coming, IoTs, the ICS, the utility is in huge risk. And we see also some new attacks to blockchain technologies. So it would be good to take care of this perfect technology too.
Thank you.
I'll take it very short and a bit higher level. I think although we are living in peaceful times in the terms of wars, in reality the wars are going on. So I think the very critical aspect is the protection of the critical infrastructure from the public point of view. This is something which it's on the constant research of vulnerabilities in all around the world, and including European Union and our countries. And the second topic is really what I've mentioned before, is the protection of the intellectual property of the corporations, the most valuable information which is there. And these are the two topics which has the highest impact, therefore they are the utmost interest of those groups.
Completely agree. Colleagues steal my points. So I'd like maybe a little bit a different view. There are short-term threats to some extent, critical infrastructure, intellectual property, by ransomware, by APT, many other things. But for me, the very important critical topic is education. And we see not only in Slovakia, we see all over the world a huge gap between needs of personnel, skilled personnel in the cybersecurity and the information security field, and ability of schools to produce some. And at the end, it's like driver. If you pass the driver education, driver test, you are not driver. You have just paper. You need experience. So education needs time, and then you need experience to be efficient enough to help the process. And specifically in Slovakia, we don't have almost anything in this area. We don't have schools producing even basic level of security specialists. We have problems with even IT students in general. There is a decreasing amount of students asking for IT education on the colleges. What does it mean? The problems on secondary schools and primary schools. So education is, for me, on the long run, a huge risk.
Thank you very much. We will touch upon several of these topics that have been mentioned in the cybersecurity V4 workshop, which will be after the lunch, where projects and best practice will be presented from V4 countries. Now I would like to take one question from the audience that has been posed through Slido. So the question is it a must that the private sector or private companies would take over the responsibility of public institutions and offices and ministries in the realm of cybersecurity? So I would suggest to start with the NSA now.
Okay, from my point of view, it's clear. At the end, everyone is responsible for own data. Responsibility can't be transferred. Owner of the company, manager of the company, public, private, whatever, responsibility lies there, and no one can transfer such responsibility. Company could ask for help, for external help, for particular areas, knowledge, skills, etc. But at the end, responsibility can't be transferred. And this is answer from my point of view to this question as well. So the government should take care on own security by themselves. They can ask for help, and they are asking for help from time to time. I don't have problem with it, but final responsibility are on the government officials running government organizations, not the private company. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I think you have also answered partially the second question. Martin, please, your view.
My view, I do agree that the organizations have their own responsibility. The state is have a responsibility for policy making, for the organizational setup, and the responsibility stays there. But what we see is that the threats are evolving much faster than the states can really react with the legislation, with all those topics and the organization. So never will be possible that all the organization can keep up. The private sector can keep up faster and has to be a partner of those organizations on achieving the level of security that they need.
To go one step beyond in your direction, I think by definition hackers are in advance versus us because they are preparing in advance, but we are more numerous on the public and private sector. So I think working together, both in the public and private sector, in order to fight, not to avoid, because at one point it will come, but to be more resilient is absolutely the key. It has been mentioned this morning, but the Paris call from President Macron goes in the right direction, in my view, because it is starting from the public environment, but also backed by Microsoft and by some large private companies. So we have to work all together in order to fight and to use all the tools we have in the public and private sector in order to fight against this threat.
Yes, I think it would not be quite effective solution to deal with the cybersecurity, as the public sector and the private sector have different attribution and different tools to deal with threats. And I think the biggest challenge here is that the private sector needs to be incentivized in some way to share information about the vulnerabilities, about everything, because the driving force of the private sector is the economic profit, and if the company doesn't see the economic profit in sharing some very important information related to cyber threats or something they noticed in the industry, I think that is the role of the public sector to incentivize the companies to close together and to work together, and this two voices, the private voice and the public sector, when they gather together, I think this is the most efficient way to build something common.
Thank you.
Shortly, regarding the education, we are just starting in the upcoming months in the University of Žilina some security training program. So if there are some other universities here, we can help and we can try to support you.
One last thing, perhaps the question should be broken down, because it is a question whether we are talking about the multinational companies. Facebook has more users than citizens of any other nation state. So that's not the Slovak government or the Hungarian or any Visegrad government to enforce something on Facebook. And it's a different question if we talk about SMEs and those agencies running critical infrastructures. And just one symbolic thing, probably you have remarked that on Monday there was an agreement signed on the internet governance after the Peace Forum in Paris, mainly initiated by President Macron in France. And it was not only 51 states signing the accord, but also hundreds of companies. So this is reality, that they are working together.
Thank you very much. I will not draw any conclusions from the discussion, because actually the aim of the discussion was to stir up discussions in the audience and in the corridors. So please continue the discussions. And I would like to thank now to our distinguished discussants, and I will hand over to Katka.
Thank you, Marek, and thank you for the great discussion. I see that there are way more questions from the Slido. So, but I'm sure that you can discuss after we conclude. Now we can move to the coffee break, and we continue at 11 with the effective public administration in this room, in this big London. And of course, we can continue with the cybersecurity after the lunch, starting 1:30 p.m. In the room Berlin before cybersecurity. So please be sure to join us at Berlin when we continue the discussion. Thank you very much.